Hello, my name is Carlos Tanner. I'm the director of the Ayahuasca Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization located in Iquitos, Peru, and we've been offering ayahuasca retreats and educational courses for the past 16 years. We've also been hosting important plant medicine research, collaborating with a team called Onaya Science. The past 3 years, we've also been working with Heroic Hearts Project to offer veterans suffering from severe PTSD ayahuasca retreats in collaboration with Onaya Science to research the effects on severe PTSD when attending an ayahuasca retreat in its native setting in the Amazon rainforest of Peru. I did a series about 5 years ago. It's crazy to think that it was that long ago already, called Lessons from Ayahuasca. And I shared a lot of the insights and the lessons that I'd learned over the decade or so, 15 years, that I had been studying the plant medicine tradition in the Amazon. And I thought it would be a good idea to come back and do another series similar to that. This series, I'd like to focus on preparation, participation, and integration. But I do feel, just like the Lessons from Ayahuasca series, the first series, that a lot of these things apply to our lives in general and can enhance our well-being through important insights based on how we view ourselves, the story that we tell, and our perceptions and interpretations. That's really what I'll be focusing on in this series. And to get started, I would like to introduce the first concept, which is like a lens through which to see the entire process, which is the story that we tell. You know, we tell a story about ourselves. Sometimes we literally tell it to people when we meet them, and that story can never capture the entirety of all of our experiences or our true identity or authentic self. And we end up choosing particular pieces of our story, and that really creates the story that we tell. And it's a story that we tell ourselves as well, even if it's not in the same conscious way that we might express to another person. It's a story that we live by in the sense that it is beliefs and personal truths that we carry about ourselves and our role in the world. And understanding our story is a good way of understanding the memories that we use as references to influence the way that we see the world. I do think that ultimately it is our memories that shape what we believe to be true in ourselves, in our lives, and the roles that we play. And it's those memories and those beliefs that influence the way that we perceive our current experiences and interpret them into that story. So, what is our awareness? Well, awareness to me is the ultimate. I think that is the theme that runs through this entire story, but also in life in general. And awareness is our physical sensations and how we perceive and interpret them, our emotions and how we perceive and interpret them, and of course our thoughts and how we perceive and interpret them. So our sensations, our emotions, and our thoughts form what I call set, S-E-T. That's like the set that you might have heard of in set and setting. That's essentially how we're coming into an experience. What are the sensations I'm aware of? What are the emotions I'm aware of? And what are the thoughts that I'm aware of? And the more awareness, the better. One of the things that ayahuasca does, and what makes it such a incredible medicine, is that it expands the access we have to sensory information. So it expands our awareness of those sensations, emotions, and thoughts that we have. And through that expanded awareness, we open the door to understand or perhaps discover inaccuracies in those perceptions and interpretations, false beliefs that we might be carrying and should let go of, and ultimately how we tell the story. Do we tell a story that makes us out to be the victim, for example? Or do we tell a story that makes us out to be the victor? Or somewhere in between? What is the nature of the character in the story that we tell that is the story of our lives? Now, I think when it comes to healing, and maybe just health in general, I like to look at what I call Trinity, or the three pillars of health. And that to me are integrity. When we don't have integrity in our health, then we have what I would call injury. And I would also say another pillar is nourishment. And so if we don't have nourishment in our lives, then we would have malnourishment. And I would also say purity or clarity is the third pillar. And if we don't have purity or clarity, then we would have toxicity. So the three pillars of health, as I see them, would be integrity, nourishment, and purity or clarity. And that leads to then their opposites, which would be the trinity of causation, which I see as injury, malnourishment, and toxicity. Now, these don't just affect our physical body. Of course, that is one of the bodies, but they also affect the other bodies that are encompassed in our identity and our being. And those other bodies I would call my emotional body and my mental body. Just as my set and my awareness is of the sensations, emotions, and thoughts, these are a recognition of the three bodies that we have, which would be our physical body, that refers to the sensations, our emotional body, obviously, to our emotions, and our mental body, to the thoughts that we have. And so we can have an injury in our physical body. That's something that we're all familiar with. But we can also have an injury to our emotional body. That would be something that we might say is like having a broken heart. That's a very literal way of describing an emotional injury. We can also have a mental injury, maybe that broken trust, for example. So an injury is one of the principal causes of illness. Now, we can also have malnourishment on a physical level, on our physical bodies, but we can also be malnourished in our emotional body. Maybe we are lacking the love or care that we need. And we can also have malnourishment of our mental body, which I would say is a limited or restricted opportunity to express and explore our innate curiosity. And then, of course, we can also have toxicity. We can have toxins in our physical body. We can also have toxic states in our emotional body and toxins of our mental body. So it's this framework that I look at the preparation process, but really it's this framework that I look at all of life. And I like to use a spectrum to describe these elements, and this spectrum can be used for all kinds of things. This spectrum is a numerical scale that is just a model, but it helps me to put a measurement to something that might seem black and white. I've just used some terms, for example, that could be called unhealthy or healthy, or toxic or pure, or malnourished or nourished. But it's really never that black and white, is it? And so I use a scale that goes from negative 100 to positive 100. And I think that that's a very helpful way of understanding where we are in each of those comparisons, rather than trying to make it out to be just one or the other. It's somewhere in that scale. In terms of unhealthy to healthy, for example, if you're in the negative, you might call that unhealthy. But being -5 on that unhealthy scale certainly isn't as unhealthy as being -30. On the positive side of that scale, from 1 to 100, you would also call that healthy. But of course, +5 wouldn't be as healthy as +30 or something like that. And I think that we can also look at that in terms of the trinity of causation. We might have an injury, but is that injury into the negatives, -10, or was that a severe injury, maybe -40 or -50, something like that, as well as the purity. We might be in the positive in our purity or our nourishment, but we're maybe not as far as we could be or would like to be, or anywhere like that. So I like to use a scale like that, and all of that to better measure more accurately the elements of awareness as well as the elements of our health. And it's that awareness that is truly key to the preparation process. That's what I'm going to be using these first 3 episodes to talk about, because awareness is ultimately what brings us to that feeling and that idea of readiness. Now, I do think that there is deserving a attention to be given to the physical elements, but I do also think that our culture is very material based, and so we probably look or give too much attention to the material elements and not enough to the non-material elements, which is one way of like understanding perhaps or contrasting what I would call the indigenous paradigm or the ancestral paradigm with the modern or Western paradigm, in that the ancestral paradigm is a very non-material focused paradigm. It's a perspective that looks at the energy of a system, the spirit, for example, as the core of a person or a being or reality itself. Whereas the modern perspective tends to look at the body, the physical body. And for that reason, our medical industry is wonderful with treating physical conditions. If you do break a bone, for example, we're great at that. But we're not so great at treating a broken heart or to be treating an injury to the mental body. And so I do feel like when I say I'm ready for something, I am speaking holistically, that I do acknowledge the physicality or the physical nature of my readiness. But I think more so I'm talking about my attitude, my emotional state, how I feel about whatever I'm embarking on or getting ready for, and how I think about it. And so I will be taking an approach like that as well. And that to me speaks a lot to awareness. So yes, I do want to be aware of the physical sensations. I want to have that awareness of my physical body, of course. But I also want to be giving enough and sufficient attention to my emotional body and my mental body. And that to me is a great place to start when we're talking about preparing for something like a psychedelic experience, an ayahuasca retreat, or really any experience that we might be having in our lives that we think requires some type of preparation. So I will leave this first episode with that, just as laying the groundwork for my perspective on preparation. And in the next episode, we'll get a little bit deeper. We'll start to go into my perspective on making changes in our preparation and how we can gain the most benefit from that. So I really hope that you found some of this beneficial, and I really hope that you come back and check out the next episode of this 10-part series on preparation, participation, and integration. Please like and subscribe. If you didn't check out that first 10-part series on lessons from ayahuasca, I would encourage you to do that. And obviously, if you want to check out the Ayahuasca Foundation, you can find a link in the information below, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns, or would like to give feedback. Thanks again, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.